Hi, everybody. Welcome to the CDOIQ Symposium. So today we have a presentation from Sridharan, Peggy, Tsai, and Shahidul Mannan as part of Track G. And this is going to be the third session, which is going to be part of the Track G track. So today, Peggy, and Shahidul will talk about data and analytics insights from the healthcare and medicinal technology leaders. So they'll tell in this session, you will hear from them the latest trends and gain insights on the data and analytics from healthcare and medical technology leaders. So Peggy, and Shahidul, who is yet to join, thank you very much for your time. It's going to be a pretty exciting talk. Over to you. It's all yours.
Thank you so much, Prashant. Hope everyone can hear us okay. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever in the world you are. This is Sridharan. I work for Becton Dickinson. I'm a senior director for data analytics, focusing heavily on the commercial side of the business. Today's talk, we are going to be covering it more in a panel discussion format. I have with me Peggy and Shahidul, who will be joining us shortly. The topic we are going to be focusing on is global issues in data analytics and management. So as we all know, this has been a hot topic recently with generative AI and a bunch of growing dimensions, in the analytics area. So that's what we'll be focusing on. And I'm here in India, so you can see my background is different. But it's very nice to be here with you all, and we'll keep this session as interactive as possible. So feel free to type in your questions on chat, and then we will take it away. With that, I will hand it off to Peggy for her introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Uma. I appreciate your invitation to join me, to join you on this panel, really. So my name is Peggy Tsai. I'm the Chief Data Officer for Big ID. And, a lot of our customers are in the healthcare medical space. I really want to participate on this panel and really share my insights really around the analytics, the future trends, and really a lot of the current topic conversations in this area. So really happy to be here with everyone today.
Thank you, Peggy. So I think we will kick it off, with a very brief high-level view on what is currently the enterprise value equation for data and analytics. So a lot of us are, in different phases of our journey, moving from value creation to value realization. Some of the challenges specific to analytics is clearly, getting the priorities from a stakeholder standpoint and creating the value itself, right? So how do we look at the value enablers and develop a value story and look at the stakeholder impact and return that value realization back to the organization? So part of, the first area that we wanted to discuss today is really our own journeys, right? As how are we going about addressing this value creation and the value realization equation. So I'll start by very briefly describing to you, what my role is and how we are enabling analytics, in certain areas within, my scope of work. So in terms of value creation, I think, there's a huge potential, clearly, both on the commercial side as well as supply chain and some of the other core operational areas. So clearly, from a stakeholder priority standpoint, analytics is way up there. And connected care is something that is a huge focus area for us. So we are spending a lot of time on looking at the stakeholder impact and the return to the organization from that standpoint. Not only that, we are also looking at from an ecosystem standpoint, how do we enable the levers outside of, just within the organization from a use of data standpoint and establish a governance process around that. So I'll stop here, and Peggy, please feel free to add your insights on on the value equation areas.
Yeah, before I do, I wanted to just double check. Uma, did you want to share the slides? I don't think we're screen sharing right now.
Oh, we are not. Yeah. Are you able to share it, Peggy?
I can do it on my end. Just wanted to
Okay. Thank you. Sure.
double check with you. Can everyone, can you see my slides? Okay. As Uma said, these are the topics that we're covering. Unfortunately, I can't see the chat questions right now, so we're trying to make sure that our third panelist joins. So I don't want to make sure that he gets to the right link. So these are the topics that we will be covering, and I really love this enterprise value equation that you talked about here, Uma, because I mean, I really see it as a flywheel effect, regardless of, again, the industry. I think the priorities come from identifying where the best value can be created in organizations, identifying what those business use cases are, identifying the data value creators, enablers, and really being able to tell that story and start to implement it and bring in the stakeholders. And that's really where the real value realization comes in. And it's an iterative process, right? Uma, I'm sure that there are multiple use cases that need to be built out. And I think that that is where the benefits realize with each other as small incremental wins really lead up to a big one. So really being able to start small and specific use cases, and then being able to really bring in the high-end value. So that's where having a good data foundation and the continuous analytical reporting is really key here. So Uma, wasn't sure if there's any other comments, but I believe we have our third panelist. Is that correct? Is he in?
Yes, I see that we have, he's in backstage. So Arabia, can you please allow him to come to the main stage? Yeah, I think he's in main stage now.
Perfect.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Uma. Hello, Peggy. Hello, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
Hi. Do you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. Yeah. Sorry for the little bit of technical glitch. My name is Shahidul Mannan. I'm the Chief Data Officer at Bond Secure Mercy Health. We are a hospital system of 65 hospitals in 7 states and Ireland, about 70,000 employees and 16 to 20 million patients. And I oversee the data assets, the data management, data productization, anything and everything related to data. And as for background, I've been in this data analytics and technology for almost 20 years, most of it in financial industry, and then moving to high tech and now in healthcare. So happy to join here, excited to be here and looking forward to a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Uma, you're on mute, but did you want to continue, maybe repeat some of your comments and pass it back to Shahidul?
Sure. Thank you, Peggy. And thank you for joining, Shahidul. We just got started with the first, part of our content. We were talking about the enterprise value equation for data and analytics, and how, there is this common theme of value creation and value realization, and analytics is becoming a huge enabler for us to drive value in various areas. So I called out 2 specific examples, one on the commercial side and one on the supply chain side. And one more thing I want to add, Peggy, to what you just covered is the approaches, right? Different companies are coming up with as far as quantifying the value from data and analytics. So one is partnering with some of the cloud providers and having like a press PR FAQ process or having a press release type approach where you kind of look at it as, this is the end outcome we want, and work backward to see what is the product or the data product that you want to deliver. The other approach is just modeling the value realization around what is the goal of the company, right? From an ROI standpoint, or be it cost savings, or be it revenue realization or incremental revenue generation. So those are some of the emerging themes that we are seeing in the healthcare area. And Shahidul, please feel free to add anything else.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. That's a great context and intro. And speaking of healthcare, I think the huge value extraction opportunity in the healthcare is driven with our goals towards value-based care, as you may have heard. And the value-based care has three major components. First is cost reduction, and second and third, all equally important, are how can we improve the quality of care, and how can we improve the patient outcome. Now, all the data analytics, digitization efforts, as you can see, we are excited to see that there's tremendous value to be done in each of these areas with data. When we do, prediction on hospital stay and manage it with optimally, we reduce the cost of care. When we do prediction of COPD or heart failure, it improves the patient outcome. And when we do various hospital automation, it certainly improves the quality of care. So those value, a lot of cases are quantifiable, as Uma, you mentioned, and in some cases, it's blended in the overall outcome. So when we go to the CFO or go to our business leaders for funding or resource and making our business case as a data leader, I think we need to create the value on both fronts, or create the story on both fronts for value. And identifiably, because of the value-based care framework, a lot of it is it can be quantifiable. So that makes it easy. And in some cases, it is measurable with our various patient outcomes and our goals for better care. And in those cases, certainly the value comes that way. And the third item for value, which is evolving and emerging, is through innovation. We are now scratching the surface for innovation, in my view, with data and AI in healthcare. And as we look at more productization opportunities, more data partnership, or even data platform sharing, there are real dollar value that we are able to extract from that. And that value is much easier to add to the bottom line, and we get a seat in the business line as well that way.
There's actually a question in the audience. I want to maybe address it now. It's relevant to this slide. What are the typical value enablers, and what are the associate KPIs? Any type of specific KPIs that come to mind when you look at this proposition?
Yeah, I think I was muted. Maybe I'll start, Peggy. So if I understood the question correctly, what are the value enablers? And what is the second part?
What are the associate KPIs?
Associated KPIs. Okay. So I think, a couple of things to think about, and like Shahidul laid out, the KPIs will be dependent on what you want to measure from a value realization standpoint, right? So if you take the enablers, I'll just take one example of revenue generation. So revenue generation from a marketing campaign standpoint. So that's the scenario. So in that scenario, omni-channel analytics is becoming a huge need. And within omni-channel analytics, there are various value enablers, like how many leads are we generating, how many leads are converting to an actual sales. And when an actual sales happen, what's the cost we are spending to generate that sales? And then post-sales, is there an appetite for generating future sales with the same customer with additional products and generate incremental revenues? So having that end-to-end view of, from the time you generate a lead to converting that lead to a potential sales to when that actually becomes, an actual customer. And then there are also other value enablers such as net promoter score, where you could have a retained customer and you're interested in looking at how, it's a very simple score from a net promoter standpoint, where you say you classify the customers as either promoters or detractors or neutral parties, right? And it's one question, literally, it's almost you do a survey with one question. Would you recommend this supplier for future business, yes or no? And based on that, you can kind of see, okay, where are we getting more positive reflections, and then enable that future value generation from the promoters area itself. So those are some of the value enablers that we can think of on the revenue side. On the innovation side, I would say it's going to be more around how do we commoditize, or how real can this digital offering or a digital service become a future product? So there are specific KPIs, and some, I think ORK, some of you may be familiar with, is something that certain organizations are striving towards. So that is another example I will call out. Peggy and Shahidul, please add anything else that you have as well.
Sure. Thank you, Uma. I think you covered it very well. I'd just add that the general value proposition that I mentioned on the healthcare provider area, we certainly go by, our overall enterprise or system metrics, like what are the ROI on certain areas, or what are the cost reduction outcome, those type of KPIs. And when it comes to the patient outcome, we try to measure and see the improvement based on, our various healthcare metrics that we have. Some of those are legally, we have to report to government, to HHS or CMS, and that eventually translates into better revenue or better payment that we can get from our payers, the insurance groups, or from the various government programs. So those are easily measurable through the bigger picture outcome, that by doing certain patient improvement use cases, be it improving or better scheduling for diabetes checkups, or better scheduling for certain follow-ups, or predicting the readmission rate and trying to lower it proactively. Those eventually shows up our larger patient outcome and patient quality of service KPIs. So those are related, and we try to relate and align it that way, that, hey, by applying these few new use cases or digital or analytics capabilities and acting on those through our system, we have seen certain outcome that is better than before. And the last one would be, as I was mentioning, just looking at the bottom line revenue generation when it comes to new products, new services, or data partnership that we create.
Great. I think there's a lot of questions that are popping up, but I think for the sake of time, we'll move on to the roadblocks to the success of DNA initiatives.
Here, so I'll take a crack at it. I think, as data leaders, analytics leaders, we all have experienced these roadblocks on various occasions, and they're still real. And this is a great Gartner survey outcome. And I'll go over some of these and try to elaborate how it is prevalent and putting up the challenge in the healthcare sector especially, and what are the things we are looking at to remediate some of these. So the skills, staff shortages is the top, and it's top across industries. We know that it's a very specialized area and highly growing area, data analytics, AI, and it's very hard to find the highly skilled people that we need and especially the technology is also changing rapidly, and we're excited to see the innovation that's happening. But when it comes to execution, we do see the challenges that not finding the right people kind of roadblocks us often. And the way we are handling it, and another point I wanted to make, especially in healthcare, there is an additional challenge. The challenge being, I think, being in various industries, I've noticed it and seen it myself, the challenge being that healthcare kind of came late in the game. If you look at the history of digitization in healthcare, it started with Affordable Care Act, which is barely a decade ago. And that led to the Obamacare, and that led to digitization first. When the digitization happened, we got the data kind of in one place for the first time, instead of many siloed places. But still there are silo and there are other technical advancements to happen. So because of that, the workforce in healthcare, where I was getting at, is not as highly skilled like financial sector or like high-tech sector. So we have a special disadvantage when it comes to skill set and resource pool. But that's the opportunity. The way I look at it is that we focus on how we can, it's a big part of our data strategy, is how we can upskill our workforce, how we can get to those shiny new technologies with the workforce that we have, and hiring and finding some more. And the blend of full-time employees and contractors and some new hires works well in this scenario. They kind of building that culture of learning and working together helps a lot. There are quite a few, so I'll go quickly on a couple others, and would like to hear from Uma and Peggy on more. So the other one that I found interesting is the lack of business stakeholder and involvement, which is very, very true for any strategic initiative or transformational work that you do in an enterprise, and especially data analytics is transformational, as we all know, and a big part and driver for digital transformation. So starting from the C-suite, you need to have the C-suite blessing for anything and everything you want to do for transformation, because it not only requires funding, it requires key driver for process and mindset change, and needs alignment with business outcome. And that then trickles down to other key stakeholders, which would be our peers. And one thing I can tell you on healthcare is extremely important, because we are a highly regulated industry, is making sure your peer stakeholders in the C-suite, the chief of privacy, chief of legal or legal counsel, and chief of security are with you along the journey, because everything and anything we do with data, we have the responsibility of being the custodian of patient data, managing HIPAA in a compliant way. We need to make sure that there is enough transparency that these stakeholders feel comfortable what we are doing with data, with patient data. We are doing it for a better outcome, but we need to manage the privacy part of it very diligently. And the last leg of it is that you want to make sure the adoption of your analytics outcome, which is using the insights for actually taking action that can build a valuable outcome. You want to make sure that the adoption is high. And for that, when you build a use case or when you build a new capability, we want to, or manage the data, we want to make sure that the people in the field actually understands the value and can use it to extract that value. I'll give a quick example where the challenge lies. So in one instance, we created a fantastic application with predictive power to build a patient outcome or patient care transition path. So as soon as the patient was in emergency department, got the entry, we could predict the outcome in a more confident way, and laid out and prepared the hospital administration to take the best care of that patient as he or she comes out of the ED. But the challenge was when we implemented it, most of the hospitals initially almost refused to adopt it because their process, people, and workforce was not ready to do it. So the learning was, when we built it, actually, when we formulated the use case, we should have worked with those stakeholders from the ground level so that when it's built and done, they can actually implement it successfully. And last but not the least, the cultural challenges, we all know it. I remember the famous Tom, I think it's Peter Drucker, I'm hoping I'm not quoting it wrong, said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So unless we have worked really hard on the cultural change and acceptance of data as an asset, acceptance of analytics as an enabler, and building that data literacy across the board so that everyone can have use the access, do better adoption, and extract the value, the strategy is not going to work. And for that, evangelism is a big arm that we need to use to overcome this. I know I took quite a bit, so please, Uma, Peggy, feel free.
I think very well said, Shahidul. The one thing I would add is, on the skill and staff shortages area, the need for a federated model is growing, I'm sure, in most of your organizations too, where analytics is not constrained to one team or one area, like a chief digital officer team or CTO and a CIO team. It's becoming more federated, where data scientists are needed across different parts of the organization. So as part of the strategy, there is an ongoing need to enable these skills across various areas. So at the same time, there are shortages, so I think that's a very interesting dynamic. And also, if we look at pre-COVID and post-COVID, especially in the healthcare landscape, there has been some challenges around hiring certain types of skills, where if you had a very specific type of skill needs, the availability has been a challenge. So it has led to adoption of various types of people learning and acquiring new skills too. So upskilling is certainly something that, as a business leader, that we are all starting to think about. How do we upskill our existing workforce to kind of take on that newer areas that are becoming a niche need, or how do we spread out the analytics landscape? And then again, the stakeholder involvement, I think Shahidul covered that very well. It's having I think different companies call it different things, like data stewards or a data product owner, or a champion. So having that is becoming a key for success from an implementation standpoint. And of course, literacy and culture goes hand in hand with everything else. Peggy, anything you want to add?
I think you both covered it very well. I mean, I think a lot of the points that I wanted to make are key here. I guess maybe I would ask the both of you a question. You both mentioned the skills and staff shortages. We know that it's not just in any industry. There's a lack of a talent pipeline around data and analytics. But one thing I've observed, perhaps specifically in the healthcare industry, in a lot of the roles and job descriptions that I look at today for my customers, there's actually, in addition to having a data skill and requirements, there's also necessity to have a background in healthcare. And I guess one question I would ask both of you is, how important is it to also have that subject matter expertise in the healthcare industry to be successful in your roles? Maybe Shahidul, you can mention it. You can talk about it as a CDO. How important is that to have the subject matter expertise in addition to the data skills?
No, excellent point. I think you're right. Subject matter expertise, understanding, the pain points for business. And as I was saying, when we look at the value proposition, it goes from inside out and outside in, meaning from the data organization to the business side, and coming from business to the data organization for solution. And for that, we actually need that subject matter expertise pretty hard. And it's such a specialized industry. It is very important to have that, to answer your question. And at the same time, now we are living in a days that where the business also needs to, and understandably everyone now understands it, luckily, that the business also needs to know about data and understand the outcome or the value of data analytics and technology propositions. So I would say the skill is kind of becoming more multidisciplinary in this space. But one last thing I want to add, even though it's a specialized skill, it is something that can be learned. And that's what we need to focus on. I think traditionally, because of speed and flexibility, we have been too focused on finding the unicorn and run with it. But now is the time, and this is a learning for us as executives, that we need to invest a lot on people and make sure the people we have, they get the opportunity to upskill, be it someone from financial coming in learning healthcare, or someone in healthcare learning more and advanced technologies. We need to invest and have that patient and have that caring and nurturing, and it's a win-win for all eventually.
That's a great point to make, and I think it helps to have data professionals and practitioners from other industries, as you mentioned, financial services and other industries coming in as well to improve and educate the culture, right? I think that is where you need to have both sides of the disciplines participate. And I think that would certainly help with a lot of the culture challenges to have that, objective implementation in terms of what data and analytics looks like, as well as working with the subject matter expertise. But again, the unicorn is certainly something that I've seen. So Uma, any last minute comments? I can move on to the next slide as well.
Yeah, sure. I think
Oh, go ahead, Uma. I think you put yourself on mute again. Yeah, perfect.
Can you hear me okay now? Yeah, sorry. I was just saying I agree with Shahidul's comment. The idea, data science is becoming a common area that many different professionals are starting to learn about. Specific to simulation models, healthcare areas, and things like that, I think there is a growing need for the expertise in healthcare.
Great. So let me just move on. There's certainly many topics that we wanted to discuss with everyone today. And this next topic, I will kick it off. We'll just talking about, the shared responsibilities against the three stakeholders. And we call this the CISO, the Information Security Officer, the Chief Data Analytics Officer, CDAO. And according to Gartner, the third persona is Deputy Protection Officer, but I like to call this the Chief Privacy Officer, just to have all the C-suite consistent there. So this is, I think, a very interesting slide from Gartner, really talking about the shared responsibilities, or what are the common tasks and objectives for each of these C-suite executives, and what they focus on. So the first one is around governance and collaboration. So when I first saw this, I thought of data governance, the traditional, standardization, the cataloging, standardization of business terms, and cataloging and inventorying. But then when I saw how Gartner defined it, certainly I think there's a different interpretation here. So I just want everybody to know, for more of a CISO responsibility, I think they're referring more to the IT governance and cybersecurity aspect of it, which is why CISOs have 3/4 of the circle filled out, meaning they take heavier responsibility. But when you're talking about data governance, certainly this would have been completely shifted. The CDAO would certainly have 100% of that responsibility of data governance and data collaboration and consistency across the organization. When you look at compliance monitoring and reporting, certainly these are traditionally been responsibilities of the security officer and the privacy officer in terms of a lot of the changing regulations, right? And certainly in healthcare, I think those type of regulations are not just from an IT perspective, but from a data perspective. So there is some attribution there for the CDAO in the organization to have responsibility. What I think is most interesting in this slide is actually data inventorying and classification. And this is where all three of these stakeholders have, they say 75% of the role and responsibility. And this is because individually, security teams, privacy teams, chief data officers, they all are responsible for. They all initiate projects that involve building out a data map, a business glossary, a catalog. They all participate in classifying or identifying the risk that's involved in each of the data assets and data sets that they do it. They have different terminologies. And, this is something that I've learned in the last couple of years, where a privacy officer is building out data maps. And in the data world, I call it a lineage or traceability diagram. CISOs have a information governance classification level in terms of how private or sensitive information is. We have something very similar like that, or CISOs work very closely with the CDAOs to also ensure that there's a right tiering of classification for that data, depending on the sensitivity and the confidentiality of that data. It's very common. There's a lot of collaboration. So this is why we call this shared responsibility, because a lot of the activities, I think, C-suite executives have not yet realized, especially in many industries, not just in healthcare, that there's a lot of commonalities in how security programs are built out, security incident responses. They all involve data. And it comes down to what I would say, just the awareness to training. In the previous slide, we talked about this from a culture perspective. There's a big influence that certainly all three C-suite executives play a part in. And I think if I were to recreate this slide, I would put more responsibility for the chief data analytics officer. I think they play a bigger part in a lot of these security, cyber security incident, breach management issues. It's not just the CISO, because it relies on the data, the CDAO certainly plays a bigger role. So maybe this is where I can get real life confirmation from you, Shahidul. I mean, as a CDO, certainly, what are your thoughts on this slide, and what is your collaboration efforts with these other stakeholders today?
Sure. Yeah. No, this is an exciting and evolving area, as you mentioned, Peggy. And I think you're spot on when you said it is becoming more and more shared than what we are seeing here. I think, and in some cases, concentrating more on the CDO front than has been traditionally. So I'll give a few examples. But first, I think the picture we're looking at, this is more what has been in the past, and also kind of flowing in some areas where it's emerging. But what I'm seeing is, and I think that is going to be the new trend, as you mentioned, the data being in the central place in many digitization drivers. We see that governance, security, and compliance are kind of merging together. They need to go hand in hand. So all the C-suite that we are looking at, the CISO, CDAO, and CPO, and I would add Chief of Legal, they need to work very closely together on all the initiatives that's mentioned here and more. And that's why we actually have created a body where all four of us participate. And we look at not only data initiatives, but and AI initiatives, but any and all technology, privacy related issues together with our, each individual responsibility and lens. And anything we implement system-wide, we need to all bless that and approve that, because everyone has, something to do or something to bear responsibility in. And then where the CDAO role has grown even further is we are actually looking at a multi-tenant separate data platform, which we are already in production and now enhancing further for data partnership, innovation, and productization. And when we are doing it, I actually have a data and information security team headed by another chief security officer reporting to me just to manage that, because this is a independent platform from IT and others. We are in alignment. We want to make sure the policies and everything is the same, but it is a completely new responsibility that we have now as a data organization to manage the security, manage the compliance of everything. We are going for high trust certification, and soon we'll go for other security certification for the platform as well. And that's very much needed to build that credibility, as I was saying before, as our data custodian. So I think this is a beginning of that. And as we are getting into, using ChatGPT and putting in more data into play, this role is going to emerge further along with my peers in the CISO and CPO offices.
Yeah, thank you, Shahidul. I think we heard the CDO perspectives from both you and Peggy. I'll just add a few other implementation nuances or areas, right, that are going. I think there was a question from Karan. I think he was asking, how can healthcare ecosystem share data between the players, providers, and everyone, for better patient outcomes? This, I think, is a very clear opportunity for shared responsibility, because when you think of that in the ecosystem, there is going to be cyber-related needs that will be there. There's going to be data privacy needs. There's going to be compliance needs. Most of healthcare data requires HIPAA compliance and several other regional needs, like Europe, for example, has EMDR. So there's a bunch of, depending on where you are, whether you're a medical devices or a manufacturer and provider, or you're more on the payer side, there are several needs for establishing these shared responsibilities. And in our aspiration to get better patient outcomes, the need for connected health is only growing. The acceptance of results are improving. So there are a lot of developments that are happening on the positive side. And this shared responsibility and accountability is going to be a key for success.
Great.
For sure, yeah.
Absolutely. Sorry, Shahidul, did you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I was just going to add to the point that sharing the data is so important, or going to be so important for innovation and for better patient outcome. And of course, we have our custodian responsibility and the HIPAA and other regulations for privacy for good reasons, and we definitely want to honor that. But I'll give an example that how data sharing can be really important. For example, when we had the COVID hit and we had the COVID vaccine out, there was a long time before we could confirm the efficacy of the COVID vaccines, because we didn't have enough data and the data couldn't be shared. So Pfizer or other companies as well were kind of hanging out there for more data, and then Israel stepped in, offering the data to validate the vaccine efficacy. And fast forward, now we are able to share data for those type of, better outcome and I would say humanity needs in a very effective way. There is a de-identification, there is an anonymization technologies that's out there that we also use time to time that can be very effectively used to manage and respect the privacy, but at the same time, use the data for greater good. So more to come on this, I'm sure. This is a sensitive area. We want to be extremely, extremely careful, but at the same time, we don't want to lose the opportunity for innovation and doing greater good.
Absolutely. So just in the interest of time, we do have 2 more topics to cover, so I will move on. Uma, I think you are going to take the lead on new emerging technologies.
Yeah, this is, this is a very interesting area for most of us who are in the analytics space, right? As as a healthcare provider, and from a devices manufacturer standpoint, the smart world area is kind of something that many of us are working on a day-to-day basis, like digital twin, the acceptance of the results from digital twin from FDA and some of the regulatory bodies. In a highly regulated industry, the acceptance of tests from digital technologies is increasing. The other areas that I think are growing, that I would say, because the topic for today is more on the issues area, is generative AI, even though I think that we are making good headway in generative AI, there is still a lot to be figured out, at least in the healthcare space. I think the idea of hyper automation is certainly growing. There was also another question on relating to the value enablers, which I want to touch on the knowledge graphs a little bit, because that's becoming a common critical enabler where you can take one customer and profile a customer through the use of customer knowledge graphs. So I would say in terms of new emerging technologies, there are 4 broad packets. One is the smart world that I initially talked about, where you have digital human or metaverse or digital twin concepts. And then the critical enablers are obviously, RPA, building bots, knowledge graphs, having technologies such as blockchain or any type of disruptors that are new. And edge computing is becoming an increasing need in the manufacturing space. On the transparency and privacy side, there is a lot of growth on the human-centered AI aspect, as well as responsible AI, where how much can you trust? And again, to Peggy's question about how important is the skill sets, there is an increasing need for like prediction of diseases, where if you look at profiling brain patterns for someone with Alzheimer's, today we have the ability to kind of profile the person's brain beforehand and say, okay, based on this pattern, whether or not this person is at risk, and treat that person and avoid that, right? So I think that is a very good area, but how private is our information is always a question that every individual is starting to have. And I think it's more on the direct provider side, and Shahidul probably can talk to that a lot more. On the productivity side, there is obviously a lot of intelligent applications. A simple one to start with would be things like, MES, like manufacturing execution systems, or having more digital ways of sharing data internally, and then building like a data mesh and a synthetic data, where you're able to kind of seamlessly share and enable data sharing both within the organization as outside of the organization. So I would say the range, the one you see in the middle in orange is kind of growing. It's already in place. And there is a very high appetite for growth in several other areas as well, as you can see in this visual.
I can jump in a little bit. I think, Uma, you covered it very well on the key ones. And I would also start with the synthetic data, as I was mentioning before. Now we are enabled with better de-identification and better anonymization, and also producing synthetic data, which is very critical for a lot of clinical trial related work, a lot of AI related work that we are doing. We need more data, good data. So it certainly helps. And then sharing the data, as I was saying, for various reasons across industries, between providers, pharmaceuticals, and payers. Unless we break these walls, I think the innovation is going to be siloed. So when we can share the data in a confident, and compliant way, we will see better outcomes and faster innovation, in my view. So that is one key area we are certainly looking at. And then generative AI, everyone is now looking at it, and for good reasons. So we are also looking at building out chatbots driven by generative AI that can, provide better suggestions or advice to our patients. 3 o'clock in the morning, they can ask questions and get quick answers. And if it's not solved, it can go to a real human or a nurse or a physician even for better response. But it's going to be more productive. And as I was saying, it's going to reduce cost and provide better understanding. And then using just machine learning and overall NLP, all those, there are tons of innovation that are yet to happen and that are happening. We are looking at building out better data for patients' history and risk stratification, so we can identify patients and their risk, be it for COPD, heart failure, or behavioral health, and then do the intervention at the right time to save lives or to ensure better outcomes. So it's just an exciting time in healthcare, and to use so many excellent tools and technologies that are coming in. But I would also shed light on the other part, which is, I think we in healthcare also feel there is a digital divide when we look at the providers or all the key players. There are some who are, on the front end of innovation and have gone through the journey of digitization quite a bit. And there are, I would say, majority, half or more, who are still yet to digitize out of the EHR-driven analytics or data. And there are still, organizations waiting to go to the cloud, let alone, build more collaborative environment to democratize data or build self-service analytics or tinkering around the AI. So for some, these are, far-fetched. There are still struggles to just manage the data, build the proper data dictionary and governance that's needed. So one thing I think is that if we can use NLP and AI, all those, just to build the data infrastructure and the preparing the data better, that would be a huge outcome in the next few years, which I'm waiting and I think yet to happen. And we all know it's garbage in, garbage out. Better AI and innovation will come once we have good data.
No, absolutely. So I don't think there's too much more I can add, but really both covered the points really well. When I think about the healthcare, certainly in such a regulated industry, there's been a lot of emphasis already on the privacy and protection of the data. But I think when it comes to how that's utilized in generative AI, the models and algorithms, there does need to be that transparency and the further protection perhaps of patient data. So I think that's really key, and having those type of ethical responsibility, I think is key, just because of the impact, the huge impact it can have if any mistakes are being done. Shahidul, you mentioned certainly the generative AI, and I think there's a lot of case studies that's already been discussed in terms of how it can improve in terms of hospitals with workflows and efficiencies. And everyday folks, when we go to the doctor, certainly there's a lot of administrative work that we see the doctors do in terms of after each visit, and having to ensure the right things like billing codes are taken into effect in terms of understanding the symptoms and all that documentation work preparation. Certainly we see from a patient perspective a lot of improvement in terms of how generative AI can be impacted and felt. So again, I think there's a lot more that we can talk, and we probably, if we had the same conversation next year as well, a lot of these new emerging technologies will certainly continue to expand. But just in terms of moving on, certainly the future of data in healthcare, we've alluded to some of these topics, but I think some great final points can be shared as well. So I'll pass it to my panelists to speak on this.
Sure, yeah. Thank you, Peggy. I think great, discussion on various aspects. And when we are looking at the future of data in healthcare, especially, as I was saying, I believe that we are just scratching the surface. And if I can give an example, 80% of healthcare data is actually unstructured data. It's the doctor's notes, it's the images, the genomic data, the CT scans, all of these, which still is unharvested. So you can imagine, as we progress with those technologies that Uma demonstrated earlier, and we figure out a better way to extract that unstructured data into our data domain, there is tremendous innovation to happen. And looking at the value extraction, of course, we are going to be driven by value, as we all have discussed. So we look at the tactical one-by-one use case or one-by-one capability for the short term, where we can generate more revenue, build more productivity, reduce costs, as I was saying, for value-based care, and risk reduction in our compliance. And as we all know, the cyber attacks has gone up with the recent international tensions and wars. So all these are something that's right on our frontier, and we got to manage those using data. And the financial outcome is super important for that. And one key learning or advice I have is that think big as we go to the right side, becoming more strategic, becoming more a financial influencer in the organization, driven by data, driven by digital capabilities, but start small. Look at some value extraction in 3 months, in 6 months, because that's how we are going to build more credibility. That's how we are going to build the culture that we talked about. And once we have those and the stakeholders aligned, then it goes faster and your strategic goals becomes easier. So that's how we then move to the strategic area where we want to see more and more automation with data in healthcare, better insights for patient outcomes, better predictive power in terms of how we risk stratify the patients so we can intervene sooner and faster and save more lives or build more high quality services. And finally, innovation, as I was saying, as we look at this enormous data and opportunities, there are products that are brewing now. And in the next couple of years or few years, I'm confident that they will mature into a self-service products driven by AI and do amazing things in healthcare. And not only it'll, again, add to the service and the quality of patient care, it will actually help become more revenue generating entity as a data organization. So I'm waiting, and I think we are going through that journey now, a day when data organizations, analytics organizations are no longer only a cost center and driver for value, but we are actually in the center of value and we are part of the business value proposition. And I think that day is not too far.
Yeah, thank you, Shahidul. I think it's an exciting time in terms of looking at the future of data in healthcare in particular. I think the things that the questions we are starting to figure out some answers. With the developments that are happening recently, specifically, on infectious disease prevention, or if we look at genomics or, cell and gene therapy, the ability to make an impact and improve patient outcomes are certainly increasing. And I think the point that Shahidul made about starting small and being able to groom that into a future step-by-step roadmap is key, especially because the opportunity is pretty huge.
And just to wrap it up, I know that we covered many different topics here today in terms of not just the value of data and analytics, but talking about the particular roadblocks, certainly in the healthcare industry for data and the shared responsibilities of C-suite. I think that there's great opportunity, certainly in terms of identifying, at least in the short term, what the business value proposition is. And I think that we're all very excited, right? Regardless of, especially in healthcare, the implementation of new emerging technologies and how we'll, and not to exaggerate, I really believe revolutionize really how not just patient care, but the entire industry as well. But this is where data will drive it, right? This is where data, the right analytics and the right decisions made from data that we collect and utilize will have a huge impact for the industry. So I'm very excited. Thank you so much for inviting me. I feel very honored to be a part of this panel. Uma, I will let you have the final word because I see you really as the leader of this group. So Uma, please close it out with your final comments.
Thank you, Peggy and Shahidul and Prashant and the team for helping us be live and supporting us with the recording and stuff like that. But I am very humbled with this experience. When I submitted the abstract, originally I had submitted the abstract for an in-person track, which was a completely different topic. More on disruptors on analytics and data. So this has been an interesting conversation, and I think that we will continue to interact through the groups. So please feel free to chime in with your thoughts. It's a great forum, and thank you everyone for being there, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thanks, Uma, Peggy, and Shahidul. It was great having you, and thanks for sharing your insights from the field. And I believe that should be great for our audience. Thanks again. And thanks,
Thank you.
Arabia, for all the backstage work on Zoom and everything.
Bye, everyone.
Okay.